The Trouble with Peace by Joe Abercrombie is the second book in the second First Law trilogy. And the first book in this second First Law trilogy was very well received. A Little Hatred was praised by fans and critics alike of being a very natural progression to the world and story Joe Abercrombie has been telling. But for this new trilogy to live up to the First Law trilogy, wow, I hate how this is coming out of my mouth. This second book needed to 100% not suffer from middle book syndrome. It needs to live up and swing hard as a continuation, be the Empire Strikes Back with the overly done pop culture references for this second trilogy. Did it do so? Well, let's get into that. Obviously, the events it picks up on are right after A Little Hatred, and we are continuing with this new generation of First Law characters. Many of the literal children from the characters of the first trilogy picking up and continuing on, having their own adventures, feels like the wrong word. Pains. And while A Little Hatred had a bit more focus on those original characters, this now really feels like this new generation is fully driving the narrative. The characters you know and love are more and more coming to the back, and this new cast is to the forefront. Do they live up, though, to the bar that is set? I believe absolutely so, mainly because of Savine Glacka. She is taking the shining light for this new First Law trilogy and doing a stupendous job. She has very interesting shoes to fill, with her father being that of Glacka himself, and she lives up to it, not by just being another clone of him, but having a unique spin on what a character with that kind of intellect and ambition could be. She doesn't have the necessarily darker, twisted past her father does, but has a very different line of abuse and troubled upbringing that plays up to this character spectacularly. We also have many other characters at play that are worth note. Leo and Orso have a clashing here that Joe Abercrombie hit on in our interview yesterday, where he talked about being inspired from Henry IV. And that shows. And it's a very great reimagining, reusage, however you want to put it, of those ideas for a First Law story. Then you add in Savine as a chaotic element, and the trouble with peace plays out. I wouldn't say this is necessarily my favorite First Law book, but it's top tier. It's fighting with Best Served Cold for that spot right now, which still maintains its top spot for First Law for me, I think. I don't know, I need to think about this one a little bit more. I just finished it last night. What should you expect, though, coming into this story? Mainly politics. This is a story of people maneuvering against each other. These characters are acting as pieces on a chessboard, to the extent that I didn't feel like there was traditional antagonist-protagonist setup, which is kind of to be expected a lot of the time for First Law. It's more just, we know these characters, they all have their own ambitions, let's see how things play out. And you, the reader, are going to decide who you're backing in these games. So different people could have their own person they're rooting for because they're all so well realized in their motivations and executions. The one criticism I could see First Law fans having is this is not the most action-packed First Law book. Don't get me wrong, there are battles, there's blood, there's death, but it's not to the extent I know some of the bloodier First Law fans enjoy. And we don't have necessarily a substitute for like Logan Ninefingers coming into play. This is more of the House of Cards, another dumb pop culture reference, side of things for First Law, with just kind of the battles coming as a result of the maneuvering and positioning that happens for the bulk of this story. It's interesting, like the original First Law trilogy is well received, but it's known that Joe Abercrombie standalones are in general more liked by his fans. Now we're getting a new trilogy where he seems to be taking all of the things he's learned over these years and crafting a new story that people are going to be hooked on that has the advantage of being 3 whole books with the quality and feedback of his entire career. It's coming out spectacularly as a result. I like that he's leaning into his politics. The plots seem to be more focused on and given love to without taking any of the spectacular energy away from characters, so they all just blend together more nicely, whereas one of the criticisms of the original First Law trilogy was that it was kind of plot as an afterthought, more just a here's the showcasing of these awesome characters. It's more balanced now, it's leaner, it's meaner, it's faster paced, and I think this could inevitably be many of his fans' favorites. And I think this new trilogy might end up overshadowing the original First Law trilogy with its overall quality, and that's not to dismiss the quality of the original First Law trilogy. Let's talk about Savine here for a minute. I'm not going to get into spoilers because I know a lot of people still haven't even started the Age of Madness trilogy, but I really dig the idea of having a literal next generation of characters come in and begin to drive the story of First Law. And it's really like scary, I imagine, for like fans out there. Like, I want my characters I know and love, but just have faith because Savine is spectacular. She's kind of this new twisted interpretation of what a Glocta-esque tripe could be. And I don't mean that in a, oh, she's unoriginal kind of format. No, she's highly original. She's very smart, very ambitious. She's just not Glocta, but she's certainly raised by him. And with these characters she has to play with, Orso and Leo, it just all comes together oh so sexily. I mean that literally sometimes. But that's what you should expect here. The political side of First Law amped up with a heavier focus on plot, with a stupendous cast of characters that we've seen before in the first book and the original trilogy, but just being more shined and honed for this latest outing from the author. Let's get into the numbers. Just getting the easiest one out of the way up front, it's Abercrombie in character. I'm giving it a 9.5 to 10 out of 10. He's just doing as well as he does. It's hard to even really criticize the characters he develops. The one thing you could say is like they're all muddled gray, kind of on a spectrum of evil to good, but closer towards this middle section. And I know some people do not enjoy that. So if that's not your particular taste, you will rate it lower. But if you're someone who enjoys having these troubled, middle of the ground characters, this will be an excellent execution of that. Continuing on from there, we have the plot. And this plot is not revolutionary. It's not the greatest of all time. It's definitely better than some of the ones Abercrombie has had driving his stories before. And I would say it's equally on par with the best of his standalones. I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10. Well above the average, very strong, but that's not necessarily why you're here. You're here for Abercrombie's characters. Let's be honest. And the atmosphere, which is outstanding and leads me into the world. World's a little bit tricky, especially when I'm in the framing of like a fantasy review, because if I say it's like a 10 out of 10 world, people expect like Tolkien style mythology, lore building, magic systems, when that's not what First Law is. First Law is almost minimal fantasy. Like this is people in a fantasy setting, and we're focusing on the people here. We don't even really get like other races, nothing like that. And especially in this industrial era this new trilogy takes place in, it feels the least fantastical yet. Overall though, that atmosphere is so undeniable. Single-handedly, I think it carries it up to a 6 out of 10. Yeah, it's not this grand sweeping landscape, but it's accomplishing what the author wants to. I'm not going to ignore that or really rate it low to like punish the idea that fantasy is required to have these like high magic systems that are super detailed. No, there certainly could be more meat on that bone, but I think it's perfectly good for what the story needs to be. So a solid 6 out of 10. Pacing is as smooth as ever, and I'm going to give an 8 out of 10. It's rock solid here, and I just enjoy that we have this trend recently here on the channel where I'm reading these lean, mean fantasy machines where the authors aren't being as indulgent. This is less than 500 pages and tells as an engaging, intriguing, nuanced story as books literally twice the size. Other authors, pay attention, please. If you don't indulge yourself and really cut down to just what needs to be there, your book will generally benefit as a result. This is why I think I've enjoyed books such as Jade City, Jade War, or Malice, or First Law, because these authors are just really tightening their narratives to a much greater extent. And so overall, what am I feeling for The Trouble with Peace? It's maybe my favorite First Law yet. It's rivaling that of Best Served Cold. I love that I'm having this continual streak of just positive reviews and loving it on the channel. I've just been getting knocked out of the park after knocked out of the park. I do wish I had rated Harrow the Ninth a little bit lower because that first 2/3, but whatever. The Trouble with Peace for me is going to be a solid 8.5 out of 10 and could be ranked higher. I just finished it last night, so I'm a little hesitant to give it a super, super high rating until I think about it a bit more, but it's an instant recommendation for any First Law fan, and Age of Madness as a whole is showing itself to be an excellent outing for this series. So I'm happy, I'm satisfied. How about yourself? Anyway, guys, let me know what you think of the Age of Madness for the First Law series in the comments down below, or just First Law as a whole. If you haven't read it, plan on picking it up. What do you think? I'm always reading those comments in the section down below. Like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here. And have a good one, y'all. Peace.